I think people in glass houses should be very careful, and Dan Wootton calling Owen Jones is a very interesting journalist. Dan Wootton called him a bed-wetting Corbynista. Lee Anderson described him as a pathetic, snivelling little weasel. Well, Owen Jones is very analytical and very careful in what he says. He describes the barge, the Bibby Stockton, as having less living space than the average parking bay. He talks with great conviction and serious backup with statistics about the problems with migration, how rhetoric has been mainstreamed as cruelty, how it exploits base emotions for a party, the Conservative Party, that has lost hope in securing victory at the next election, and it's going to deny people hope. It's offering instead fear, bigotry, and hatred. I'm inclined to agree with him. So if we are angry at the migrants, that means we're not angry at bankers, at bosses that don't pay, at tax avoiders, at private landlords who are ripping off their tenants. It's an interesting and a persuasive argument. And he is also right, I think, that the hatred of minorities is predicated on the dehumanizing of those people. The precondition for persecution is the systematic dehumanizing of whole groups. We've seen it in the past. And he points out that cruelty has become the latest trademark of Conservative activity. Now, it's always been there, certainly since 2010 and Mrs. May's devotion to the hostile environment. That is cruelty. But I don't believe this is something that all Conservatives shared. And I think this is something that has taken over the baser aspect, the darker aspect of the Conservative Party has been taken over by cruelty. And it's beautifully exemplified in the painting over of the murals in the Kent Detention Centre. There is no other purpose to that than cruelty. It cost £1,500. Well, it cost £1,500 to paint over those murals. I don't know how much the murals cost in the first place. I suspect we're looking at a bill of about £2,000. That £2,000 that could have been used to make people's lives better. Instead, that has been sacrificed on the fire, on the bonfire of cruelty, to accept and tolerate evil. And we're looking at an attack on the most vulnerable. So many people who leave their countries because of war, because of famine, or whatever the reason they're leaving their countries, so many of them have died. 29,000 people have died trying to make their way to the EU and to the UK. Here in the UK, so many of them have been misidentified as adults when they are in fact children. And why is that? And many of them are men or boys. Why is that? Because families club together to pay the exorbitant fees to get their children, their boys, out of the line of fire, because they will be the first conscripted, they will be the first tortured, they will be the first raped and assaulted. And so many refugees simply are displaced in their own country. But those children, those boys, make their way because they're tough enough, their families believe, to get to a place of refuge, maybe they speak English, which would explain why they want to come to the UK. They don't speak French, they don't speak German, they speak English because of the power of the EFL industry, which I was a part. And that's the other side of it. We have promoted English, so we should take responsibility for that. In some cases, these people have come from English-speaking territories that we had conquered in the past. Our colonial ambitions. We should take responsibility for that as well. And I suppose the families hope that eventually when their boys get to the UK, they can make enough money to get the rest of their family over. It's unlikely. It's unlikely. And the hostile environment is something they cannot possibly have anticipated. How would they know? How would they know that? Particularly when we know that, for example, in Albania, there's TikTok campaigns offering a better life in the UK. And Suella Braverman and her cronies have done nothing to convince people in Albania that it's not true. All they've done is posted people at the airport. Lazy, second-rate, and superior attitudes that have not actually dealt with the requests, the constant requests from the Prime Minister of Albania, who surely knows better. What we've got is not only cruelty. I would accept a lot of what Owen Jones says. Not only cruelty, but stupidity on a monumental scale. The stupidity mixed with arrogance. So Owen Jones says we have cruelty. I think we have stupidity and arrogance, and I think we have that more than cruelty. It may result in cruelty. I don't think most of the Conservative Party are determined to be cruel. But I think their stupid, arrogant gestures and their laziness, their failure to look at the legal issues in detail, and many of them are lawyers, but we know from experience, do we not, that lawyers are monumentally lazy. They flick through a brief and then they think they know what they're talking about. And unless you've got a lawyer, your case is dismissed. Because lawyers like to deal with other professionals, quote. They like to feather their friends' nests. But there comes a point where truth is more important than the old boys club. Truth is more important than the school tie. Truth is more important than a nod and a wink. And I'm afraid we're fast approaching that point. And I think Owen Jones speaks a lot of truth. I think there's a lot of truth being spoken by Maya Tusi. I think there's a lot of truth generally being spoken on the internet. Marina Perkis. Now, all of these people may not agree with one another, but and in fact, I'm sure Owen Jones and Maya Tusi would definitely not agree with each other. But the people that I've referenced have an understanding of humanity. And I think it's important going forward that we abandon the tribalism of this party or that party, because the problem is not the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the SNP. The problem is the lure of power and the self-satisfaction of authority. And I don't think if and when a Labour Party gets into power in the next year, we're going to see a big difference, because it's the same group at the same trough. And it's going to take such an upheaval to change that mindset. But that mindset has to change. We have to stop looking at feathering our own nest and start looking at helping people. Or change the way we do politics completely, and that would probably be proportional representation and an overhaul of the entire system.